The wedding dress had been white once. Now it was the color of the road, dusty, torn, and stained by the long scrape of Main Street. The hem dragged behind her like a broken promise, catching on stones, splintered wood, and the hard laughter of men who had forgotten what mercy looked like. Eliza Harper did not scream, not because she didn't feel pain. Every step tore at her skin. Every yank of the rope burned her wrists, but because screaming had already been taken from her. The town of Red Hollow had decided she was guilty long before sunrise, and guilt, once declared by enough angry voices, became louder than truth. The rope around her wrists was tied to a saddle horn. Sheriff Claymore rode ahead, his back straight, his badge catching the sun. He never looked behind him. People poured out of saloons, shops, and doorways as the procession passed. Some stared in silence, some whispered, some laughed. "Shame," an old woman muttered, though whether she meant Eliza or the town itself was unclear. Eliza lifted her chin. Her dark hair had fallen loose from its bridle pins, sticking to her cheeks with sweat and dust. She tasted blood where her lip had split, but she kept her eyes forward. Just yesterday she had stood at the edge of the church with flowers in her hands, waiting for Thomas. Thomas, who never came. Instead, they came. They accused her of stealing payroll money from the rail office, money that had gone missing. The same night, Thomas vanished. Sheriff Claymore said she'd helped him run. The mayor nodded. The crowd believed. No trial, no questions. Only rope. Only judgment. At the center of town, they stopped. Sheriff Claymore finally turned in his saddle and looked down at her. His eyes were cold, like a man examining a problem already solved. "Let this be a lesson," he said loudly. "Red Hollow don't tolerate betrayal." Eliza's knees shook, but she didn't fall. "I didn't do it," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It died quickly. Claymore leaned down. "You should have chosen better company," he said quietly so only she could hear. Then he straightened and raised a hand. The rope was cut. Eliza collapsed onto the dirt. Laughter broke out again, but it faded when a single sound cut through the noise. The slow clap of boots on wood. A man leaned against the post outside the general store, hat low over his eyes, coat dusty from travel. He hadn't been there before, or maybe he had and no one had noticed. He pushed off the post and walked forward. The sheriff frowned. "This don't concern you, stranger." The man stopped a few feet from Eliza. He looked down at her, not with pity, not with hunger, not with judgment, with recognition. "Looks like it does," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. He knelt and set something in the dirt beside Eliza's hand. A revolver. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Claymore's hand went to his own gun. "You..." Remaking a mistake. The cowboy stood slowly. Mistake was dragging an innocent woman through the street in a wedding dress. Eliza stared at the revolver. Her fingers trembled. She had never held a gun before, but she understood what it meant. The cowboy met her eyes. "You gonna stay on your knees," he said softly, "or you gonna stand?" For the first time since dawn, Eliza felt something break through the fear. Anger. She wrapped her fingers around the grip. The weight of the revolver was real, solid, honest. She pushed herself to her feet. The town went silent. Sheriff Claymore took a step back. Eliza raised her head, dust falling from her hair, her dress ruined, but still hers. She did not point the gun, not yet. "My name is Eliza Harper," she said, "and I will not be buried by your lies." The cowboy tipped his hat, and Red Hollow, for the first time in years, felt the wind change direction. No one in Red Hollow moved. Eliza could hear her own breathing, sharp and uneven, louder than the wind brushing against the false fronts of the buildings. The revolver felt heavy in her hand, heavier than fear, heavier than the silence pressing down on the town. The cowboy stood beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she felt steadier. Sheriff Claymore was the first to recover. His fingers twitched near his holster, but he didn't draw. "You put that gun down," he said, forcing authority into his voice. "This woman's accused of theft and conspiracy. You interfere, you'll answer for it." The cowboy smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I've been answering for things most of my life," he said. "Truth usually catches up quicker than lies." He turned to Eliza. "You trust me enough to walk?" She nodded. They walked slowly through the parted crowd. No one stopped them, not because they believed Eliza, but because uncertainty had crept in, and uncertainty scared people more than guilt. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of town, where the buildings thinned and the land opened into scrub and sky. Only then did Eliza lower the revolver. Her arms shook. The cowboy took the gun gently from her hand and spun the chamber closed. "You did fine," he said. She looked at him, really looked at him now. His face was weathered, older than she'd first thought. A thin scar ran along his jaw. His eyes were the kind that had seen too much and remembered all of it. "Who are you?" she asked. "Name's Jonah Cole." Something about the name stirred a distant memory. "I heard that name once," she said slowly. "From Thomas." Jonah's expression darkened. "Then we're chasing the same ghost." They sat near an old fence line while the sun dipped lower. Eliza told him everything. About the missing payroll. About Thomas leaving to check the rail office late at night. About the sheriff's men coming for her before dawn. When she finished, Jonah was quiet for a long time. "Thomas didn't steal that money," Jonah finally said. "You don't know that." "I do," Jonah replied. "Because I followed it." He explained that he'd been tracking corruption, tied to railroad expansion, towns, squeezing workers dry, officials pocketing money meant for laborers. Red Hollow was one of them. The payroll vanished, Jonah said, because it never made it to the workers. Sheriff, mayor, rail boss, they split it. Eliza's chest tightened. "Then why blame Thomas?" Jonah's eyes hardened. "Because he saw them. And because he planned to talk." Eliza swallowed. "Where is he?" Jonah didn't answer immediately. "He's alive," Jonah said at last. "But barely free. They're holding him outside town, waiting for the dust to settle." The world tilted. "He came back for me," Eliza whispered. "They used me to trap him." Jonah stood. "Then we don't give them time." As night fell, Red Hollow lit its lamps, pretending nothing had changed. But whispers followed Claymore through the streets. Doubt had roots now. They moved quietly along the ravine north of town, toward an abandoned rail depot Jonah had scouted earlier. Eliza had never thought of herself as brave, but anger had sharpened her fear into something usable. At the depot, they heard voices. Thomas was tied to a post inside, bruised but standing. Two men argued nearby. Jonah acted fast, distraction, movement, precision without cruelty. The guards fled rather than fight. Eliza ran to Thomas. He looked up, disbelief flooding his face. "Liza?" She held him, laughing and crying at once. "We're not done," Jonah said behind them. "Not by a long shot." Morning came hard and bright. Red Hollow gathered again, but this time the mood was different. Fear had shifted sides. Jonah stood at the center of town with Eliza and Thomas beside him. The stolen payroll, recovered from the rail, office safe, sat in a strongbox at their feet. Sheriff Claymore tried to speak, but voices drowned him out. Jonah raised a hand. "Truth don't need shouting," he said. "Just daylight." Thomas stepped forward. His voice trembled, but it held. He told them everything, what he'd seen, who was there, how they'd threatened Eliza to silence him. One by one, townsfolk turned their eyes on the sheriff. The mayor slipped away. Claymore reached for his gun. Eliza spoke first. "Don't." Her voice stopped him cold. She wasn't begging. She wasn't afraid. "I stood in this town in a wedding dress," she said. "And you dragged me through dirt because it was easier than admitting what you'd become." The sheriff's hand fell away from his holster. Men stepped forward, rail workers, shopkeepers, people who had lost wages, dignity, years. Claymore was disarmed. The badge hit the dirt. Justice didn't arrive with gunfire or blood. It arrived with witnesses and resolve. By noon, Red Hollow had changed. Jonah prepared to leave. "You could stay," Eliza said. "This town could use someone like you." Jonah smiled softly. "Towns don't change because of men like me. They change because of women who stand back up." He tipped his hat and rode out. Eliza and Thomas rebuilt not just a life, but a truth. The dress was gone, but something stronger replaced it. And Red Hollow remembered, not the day she was dragged through town, but the day she stood,